Today's Tuesday, May 12th, and like it or not, ready or not, after nearly 3 months of sheltering in place, the business community is preparing to get back to work. Now, for some businesses, the task will be absolutely monumental because they'll have to overhaul their operations and reconstruct workspaces to welcome returning employees to a safe work environment. Now, some businesses may remain virtual for now, but most will need some workable balance between remote and in-office work. And to help business owners and managers prepare their businesses for reopening, design new systems and policies to make their workplaces safe and their employees engaged, I'm excited to welcome an expert in post-COVID-19 HR policies, Becky Barton. Now, Becky is the founder and principal HR consultant of People 415, which is a San Francisco-based consulting firm providing solutions for growing companies. Now, the team at People 415 works with clients in a variety of industries on matters affecting their employees, all the way from hiring to firing and virtually everything in between. And most recently, Becky has become an expert on COVID-19 return to work consulting, which is one of the reasons I'm so excited to have this conversation with her today. And with that, I'd like to welcome Becky Barton to conversation. Hey, Becky.
Hi, Roman. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for being here with us. Well, let's jump right in, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, so listen, most of us have been sheltered in place now for 3 months or so. And I think it's fair to say that we're all past the initial stages of triage. And as many businesses now begin to think about reopening, what work trends are you hearing about in the business and in the HR consulting community?
Yeah, great question. There's a lot of trends emerging. Just to start, one thing that's not necessarily a trend per se, but I do want your audience to be aware that there are some requirements coming down from the Department of Public Health that will be triggered once you start welcoming your employees back into the workplace. Our focus today will be a little bit more on remote workers, but I just want to make sure that people know to, reach out and get help from an HR professional to navigate those requirements, because as an employer, you do have a requirement to provide a safe workplace for your employees. I think the biggest trend, and one that's really not going anywhere and will likely be a permanent way of working for all of us, is really managing remote workers and keeping them engaged in the business. I think that practice is here to stay. With a remote workforce, companies right now are thinking a lot about, how do they reallocate some of the office perks that they used to have, like in-office lunches and snacks and things like that, to maybe repurposing those into, remote benefits, like a subscription service for an employee that's at home, or some sort of other, delivery type service. Another trend is really the shift in the work schedules. It just seems like people are working morning, noon, and night, and weekends to balance all of their other life demands and allow time off for homeschooling. So those are the big trends I'm seeing today.
Becky, you'd mentioned kind of an engaged employee or engaged employees, and especially while we're still and potentially going forward working in a more remote setting. Can you talk about sort of what's the importance around having your employees be engaged?
Absolutely. Us HR professionals have a bad habit of talking lingo, so thanks for asking. Really, engaged employees are more productive employees. So, why should you care about that? Of course, you want your employees to be productive. If you think about engagement as really continuum of, having that sort of clock watcher, order taker person on one end, and an entrepreneur type person on the other end, you want to move your employees closer to the entrepreneur level of engagement. So the engaged employees are going to spend money like a business owner. They're going to make decisions like a business owner. They think about the bottom line, and they seek the growth opportunities and make decisions in the best interest of the organization.
I like how you described that, kind of the clock watcher and the entrepreneur on the other side. We may need to have a separate conversation about how we can have more entrepreneurs on our teams. But to stay with the theme, given that you've mentioned one of the key trends that you're seeing developing is this remote working continuing to play a role in our lives and in how we work. Obviously, it's important for business owners to think about remote work policies while keeping their employees engaged. What would you say that business owners and managers should really focus on to manage virtual teams and keeping everybody engaged for the long-term success?
Yeah, I mean, communication is key during this time. Reach out, ask your employee, can you take this on? Really discuss and align expectations during this time. You won't be passing employees in the hallway any longer, so you really do need to be intentional about reaching out to your employees and connecting with them to understand expectations and deliverables and deadlines. In the former world, maybe connecting once a week was enough, and maybe it won't be the same. Right now, a lot of clients are moving towards, daily huddles. Maybe those are more effective to have those quick check-ins. You need to do what makes sense for your workflow and your audience and really keep that human connection strong during this time. One of the other things that I think is really important too is to try to keep the team, especially those that rely on other people to do their work and have other kind of dependencies on their projects. See if you can keep the team working some sort of common hours. It probably won't be 9 to 5 given all of the challenges, but can the team overlap for a couple of hours in the morning? Can they overlap for a couple hours in the afternoon? That way the team knows when they can count on each other, rely on each other, and work together. And just be flexible. Sometimes meeting at 5 o'clock is going to be better than meeting at 10 a.m. Sometimes a Saturday a.m. appointment might be better. Given your audience, you just have to do what's right for your people. And then utilize technology. Maybe text messages or video messages are a better way to communicate with your people. You just have to do what's right for them. But if you can find those kind of right office hours for the team to align, you'll keep your projects on track through this period. And something that's, not quite as, sexy and fun to talk about is HR policies. It is important to have a policy around this stuff and to have a budget associated with it, because a budget then actually puts the policy into effect and really gives it life. Now that people are at home, you have to think about, what equipment should you be covering? In some states like California, you might be required to cover some things like Wi-Fi or cell phone. I'm seeing companies cover, chairs, monitors, things like that. It's important because, the longer we have this remote work scenario in play, you will have an increased exposure for things like repetitive stress injury if your workstation is not set up ergonomically. So a great, partner in that is your workers' comp carrier. They'll have a ton of information they can send to, really help, set up those workspaces and really get employees to work in an environment that's comfortable, employees are safe, and they're being productive.
Yeah, so this is something that you bring up a point, at least in my own mind, that preparing to go back to work in a more normal ways that we're used to has to be really thought through from two different perspectives. There's the kind of to me at least, is the softer tissue stuff. It's the taking care of our employees, making sure the workplace is safe and conducive for them. But on the other side, it's this, maybe it's a legal requirement that's imposed by our city or state. And it's something definitely we as business owners need to think about. And I want to come back to that. But before asking the question, you'd mentioned flexibility in kind of answering the last question, and that we need to be more flexible, and whether that be schedules and how we work. And just even thinking of our own families, it's what about, folks that have kids at home, or say school-aged kids. And so there's this ongoing challenge of homeschooling. As we enter the summer months, we might not have access to the camps that we would ordinarily send kids to, or childcare. What would you say to business owners and managers around working and managing their remote staff that has kids at home?
Yeah, this is so important of a topic right now. I think daily we're getting our notices on camp cancellations. So definitely hits close to home for me. For again, communication is going to be the most important thing in this. Ask your working parents, what do they need? What can you support them with? Are they on task? Are there blockers that you can help move? Ask your single working parents twice as often how you can help. Really
Mm,
check in with them. When this started, I set up an out of office message so that clients would know, I'm homeschooling, or these are my office hours. And I got really positive feedback on that. So consider setting up an out of office message so that team members working together know what to expect. Clients alike, they all know when you're on and when you're off. Some companies have even started a payroll code, if you will, where you log your homeschooling time. Tends to be some of the larger clients,
mhm.
larger employers, but I think what's really impactful about that is it gives the employee the green light that it's okay to spend the time homeschooling and that the company supports that. And we really just have to think creatively about how projects are being tackled. Can a project move to a different team member that maybe doesn't have the additional burden of homeschooling? Can something that's more time sensitive go to that person, and a project that can be done off hours, maybe go to someone who is doing the homeschooling? Are there ways to shift the work around and do some sharing of projects that might work to the benefit of all? Um, and for those that are managing people, it's just so important to lead by example. You can't forget to be human. You've got to be, really setting that example for your team, about, what's expected in terms of hours. We don't want to burn out if people are working around the clock, like I, mentioned in the beginning. We have kind of been going at a heavy clip the last few weeks, and it's time to kind of just, reset a little bit and settle into that. Really show that you care about your team by, you know, being intentional about your expectations and when they should be on and when they should be off. Employees feel loyal to a company because of a good and caring manager, and it's just really important to keep that connection during this time more than ever.
I have a series of questions lining up in my mind, but we are still going down this path that I don't want to take us, off track. But you know, I think you're so absolutely right that it's all about relationships, whether it's personally, professionally, at work.
Hmm.
And I feel that with all of us sort of shifting away from our normal office personalities and office work, and as we've been at home for the last few weeks, I do feel that a lot of companies have had the opportunity to better engage with their employees, with their staff, and with their managers,
Hmm.
in a more human, more real way. And so, as we consider this going forward, I'm just wondering, do you recommend that business owners and managers actually document these policies as a way of thinking through them, or should this just be purely in their own head? Because I can see that can get
Hmm.
pretty overwhelming quickly with all the changes that we're going to have to take.
If a company is taking a position on something like work from home that, and wants to have some sort of guidelines or rules about it, you definitely should write it down. It doesn't have to be like some big elaborate policy, but document it in an email. At least then you know what's expected and what's reasonable. A question that has come up is, as we continue these remote work arrangements, is working in a coffee shop when coffee shops reopen, is that acceptable from a work from home? These are the kinds of things that business owners need to think about, if they haven't been doing remote working. Set
Mhm.
some ground rules and guidelines and get the guardrails on, and then that way everyone can kind of row at the same in the same direction, if you will.
And when you talk about sort of leading by example, and whether it's how many hours we work or when we
Mhm.
work or where we work, we've talked quite a bit about what managers can do to have these productive outcomes with their employees. But what about as individuals? And when you talk about being a role model, like what can we do
Mhm.
better?
Yeah.
And what would you recommend?
Yeah, number one, communicate. That's definitely a theme of today. So, let your supervisor know what's going on. What can they expect from you.
Mhm.
And particularly if you can't deliver on something, speak up, let them know, because likely they know of another resource they can pull in or help move some blockers to your project. So definitely communication is key. For those of us as individuals, nobody's going to take care of us. You've got to get the self-care program in play. So take your breaks every hour, get up and stretch, build time to exercise, get off of social media, take a break. Keep healthy food and snacks on hand. Pretty basic, but important right now. And maintain a routine. A lot of people, they use their commute time, for example, to connect with friends and family, to meditate, to do their positive affirmations, whatever that stuff is. Make sure you're scheduling that into your day, because you're not going to have that same routine you used to, and you need to build in those, be intentional again about those kind of triggers in your life. And something I think that's important that, some employers are navigating right now, and employees, and I'm helping them navigate this, is, if it's not working, think about alternatives. Is there another solution that could work during this period?
Mhm.
And what I mean is, if large employers tend to have an employee assistance program, use it. There's a lot of resources out there, mental health resources, other kinds of connections to different services. Um, and also consider, maybe a short-term leave of absence or some sort of reduced hours might make sense during this period. Companies may or may not have a policy around this. So if they do, review that and get familiar with it. But ask those questions, because it really could create a win-win for both the employee and the employer. Sometimes when you have these, a leave of absence, for example, you might be able to maintain your healthcare insurance, and then the company gets the benefit of a break on the payroll costs. So it really is, just kind of think about, what might work for you, and would that
Mhm.
also benefit the company? And there's
Mhm.
also some, leaves associated with this, and rights you have as well. But I think it's important to recognize, if you're not able to, really be productive and functioning in this time, talk to your manager.
Really good tips. And speaking of questions, we have one of our viewers, Leah, is asking a question. I'm
Great.
going to spotlight it, but because of this, I think the size of the comment box, I'm going to read the rest of it. So, do
Mhm.
you have advice on how to motivate staff who are working from home, who are not self-driven and struggle
Mhm.
with working independently anyway?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, Leah, great question. And what I would say is, with someone that really needs that drive and help with that drive, you will really need to have those very intentional check-ins and sort of lay out the project plan, the roadmap, whatever it is that you're asking them to do, with very clear deadlines along the way. I would really chop up projects into small pieces, and have probably daily huddles. What's on your project list for today? I might even do it again in the afternoon. What did we complete? And just really help them manage along with their work, because they're going to need that help. And if you're used to being in an environment maybe where you were constantly, stopping by their desk and asking them, hey, did you get to that? Or, hey, how's this coming along? You need to create that environment in this virtual setting.
It sounds like we're coming back full circle to the one of the first things that you told us to do better, which is communicate, communicate, and
Yeah.
communicate. I'm getting the theme here. Leah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. And I want to throw it out to everybody else. If you are watching this live and have questions, feel free to type it into the comment box below. And Becky will answer your questions as best she can. And if you're watching this, even as a replay, please click the like button or comment, so that we at least know that this is helpful and we should keep doing these conversations. And also, if you have questions, even after the fact, let us know. We'll be monitoring, and I'm sure we'll get back to you with answers. And as we just continue going, Becky, one of the things that you had mentioned, just in terms of keeping your employees engaged, and with Leah's question, what it made me think back to are some of the personality tests that I know they were kind of common at different periods. along the way that you kind of want to know who it is that you're really working with. And I almost feel like now
Mm-hmm.
more than ever, that's
Mm-hmm.
probably very, very important because we're not face to face as much. We're not able
Mm-hmm.
to observe and kind of manage some of our team members that might not thrive when they're left to their own devices
Mm-hmm.
at home. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Roman, it's as if you planted this question. This is amazing, because I do think that this is a great opportunity to do something like a disc assessment, for example,
Hmm.
with you as a manager and your team members. If you haven't heard of this, it's really a tool that helps to assess your communication style. What kind of information do you thrive best in receiving? How can you communicate to others so they receive it?
Hmm.
I think it's a great time to do something like that so that you can establish some common language around how you communicate and set some expectations with the team members.
Hmm.
So definitely, if you're struggling and you just need to like hit the reset button with your team, I think that's a great tactic to take.
Well, since we're on the topic of good things that we can do for our business, tell us a little bit more about People 415. What do you guys do?
Mhm.
Who can come to you? What kind of questions should they come to you with, and what kind of problems can you help them
Mhm.
solve?
Yeah, we generally work with companies anywhere from 1 employee to 30 employees. It's kind of our sweet spot. Those size employers tend to lack in-house expertise to navigate employment issues.
Hmm.
Um, Oftentimes, the business owner is handling them, and that can really distract from their ability to grow the business and manage their business. Or they might be utilizing their employment attorney, which is a tremendous resource and needs to be part of the solution, but it's pretty costly. So we work really well with employment attorneys to help in that work. A good time to call would be if you find yourself really struggling with a solution to an employee matter. There's 4 of us on the team, and we have a combined experience of about 90 years. So chances are we've, probably seen it somewhere before. And so
Hmm.
that, the insight of working with a lot of different companies, different industries, and different situations really positions us to, be able to help the business owner along.
And any particular tips that you might offer to business owners or managers, again, of those teams 1 to 30, as we begin to think how we're going to reopen and how to set up the schedules? Are these resources that you guys can provide, or do you want to leave us with some tips on what we should think about on our own?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I mentioned from the beginning, there is a whole host of, really compliance driven requirements that you
Mhm.
need to be doing if you're going to be welcoming employees back into your
Mhm.
workplace. So certainly we can help with navigating those. The Department of Public Health is a tremendous resource in terms of setting the standards, at least for the city of San Francisco, which is where our business is based. Um, but the other, like writing a work from home policy guidelines, if you haven't done that, I do recommend doing that so that everyone is playing from the same sheet of music. Certainly, those are services we can help with and communicating that to employees. We work well with the accounting departments at clients as well, to come up with, okay, what's some reasonable expenses that should be covered
Mhm.
during this time and the like. So, yeah, really important to think about that and be, like I said, intentional and get everyone on the same page.
Um, all very good reminders. So I'm taking away communication is key. Um,
Hmm.
Thank you for driving that point home. I think that is always good advice in every facet of our life, whether it's work, home, kids, spouses, significant others, business partners,
Hmm.
employees, all around great reminder. Um, it sounds like the work from home is a trend that you anticipate will stay with us for some time. And an
Hmm.
effort to keep
Hmm.
folks engaged, you'd mentioned also being more flexible with both schedule, workloads. Am I missing any of kind of big key points that you wanted to share with our audience?
Well, I think one thing I do hear sometimes from clients is flexible doesn't necessarily mean you're not still having the same amount of demands and expectations of employees.
Mm.
Those still stay. You still have you get agreement on what a deadline is, a deliverable, and when it's going to be done or partially done or however your project runs,
Mhm.
depending on the type of work you do. And so I just want to make sure that it's not. The flexibility and all that doesn't in any way discount productivity and expectations, because those still should stay high. It's again just reaffirming and being very intentional, an agreement on both sides about what's going to happen and when.
And I think again, it's a good thing to think through um, for all of us. And I suppose there's no bad time and there's no wrong time to do this. But right now, especially as we're being sort of forced to think about some of these
Hmm.
things, we may as well sit down and think about all the aspects of our business so that when we do come back to work, or if we choose to continue more of the remote work arrangement or some combination of the two, that we're ultimately all working towards the business goals that we have,
Hmm.
keeping everybody on the same page, keeping those expectations and milestones clearly visible.
Hmm.
So it's more along the lines of business planning, HR consulting, all being kind of worked on at the same time.
Hmm.
Um, were you going to say something? And there's another comment that came in I wanted to spotlight, but it sounded like you were just about to say something first.
Well, yeah, I was going to just say, that being remote doesn't mean you still can't deliver on your strategy.
Mhm.
Obviously, a lot of businesses are unique, but there still can be a lot that can be done to align your strategic plan during this time. The employees are going to continue to be remote due to, social distancing requirements when you go back into the workplace. So most employers will have to manage this kind of hybrid
Mhm.
employee base of some that are remote and some that are not. So the sooner you can kind of get your arms around it and really define what it means for your company, the easier it will be for your employees to also be productive and successful in that environment.
Well, and I'm going to take this as an opportunity to spotlight you for a second, because I know that that is one of many things that you can help business owners and managers think through and prepare for and build policies around. So, do you want to tell folks, if they're interested in reaching out, how they should best reach you?
Absolutely. So obviously we have a website, but more importantly, we're people. So I believe we'll be sharing I have a Calendly link that we'll be sharing, I believe, at the end. So if there's an interest in talking more, be happy to take a phone call. There it is. Look at how perfect that is. Thank you, Roman.
I got you,
So yeah,
Becky.
just, so schedule a time to chat. I mean, most of these things start with a conversation and just evolve from there. And if I can't help you, chances are someone in my network can. So would love to hear from you.
Thanks, Becky. And we have another question that came in the comments. And again, well, it looks like it did fit. So, what would you say there? So, how to best deal with anxiety of workers,
Mhm.
especially if you have mixed workplace, some on site and some are returning.
Yeah, I think this will be a real challenge for employers to navigate because, there's going to be this, reluctance perhaps to go into the workplace if employees don't feel safe and they don't feel, that they can take public transportation to get there and some of those other ways. So, this is evolving. I would say what I'm seeing so far is that in that scenario for employees that are reluctant to return to the workplace due to a fear or something like that, fear of it not being safe, employers are being sort of coached to just maybe give them their space right now and not push it too much. If they can be effective remotely, keep them remote. I think that as this evolves, right now a lot of the um, illnesses related to COVID-19, employees do not have to produce a doctor's note. There was a real, at least for San Francisco, a real halt on doing that so as not to overwhelm the health system. It would be it would not be unusual, I guess, for an employee to produce a doctor's note under normal circumstances to say that there's, a concern about their mental well-being. And I would anticipate that here as well. So I think if they can stay remote, keep them remote.
And it's a really good question. I guess one of the follow-up questions that I would have, Becky, to you, and I think I know the answer to the question, nor am I asking you to practice law, but I imagine there may be employees that are worried because they have someone else in their household that may
Hmm.
be in the higher danger zone. They might have some pre-existing conditions. And again, it's that
Hmm.
anxiety of maybe coming back, not so much of their own concern for themselves, but for someone else in their household.
Hmm.
And I wonder what you would tell um, owners of businesses or managers that are
Hmm.
managing teams how to best navigate a conversation with employers.
Yeah.
Sesky, thank you
Yeah,
for asking a very thoughtful question.
that's another great question. When the employee drives that kind of request, then the employer should consider it, and if they can make an accommodation because somebody is, working or in the home with someone who say is elder, compromised immune system, whatever it might be, then make do what makes sense. On the employer side, however, you absolutely should not make decisions about who comes into the workplace based on that information. You need to make
Mm,
your decisions based on work-related reasons. So, your most essential employees should be the first to come back. Whoever can. I think the guidance we're hearing is really, keep as many people remote as you can. So, I'd say only have your essential workers come in. Don't make decisions based on someone's age or someone's perceived medical health condition. That's where I think an employer could get into a lot of trouble. But the employee themselves, they should speak up if they have something like that and let their employer know.
Well, this has been a wonderful and enlightening talk. I'm glad that we're putting some of this negativity behind us and thinking about kind of the well-being of the whole team. And like you said in the beginning, or we said in the beginning, that we're sort of past the triage stage. Now we're beginning to
Hmm.
think more strategically and long-term about what we actually want as opposed to what we have to
Hmm.
respond to. Do you have any
Hmm.
final kind of thoughts, ideas to share with our listeners and our viewers today?
I do think it's really exciting to see companies that, and even clients that I have today that were resistant to remote work opportunities, and really see that it can work, and how much it can benefit that person in terms of their engagement with the company and staying, retained with an organization. This will change the landscape of how we recruit people, where you can do business, different time zones. I mean, there's just such a tremendous opportunity that comes along with remote work. So it's a really exciting time for employers.
I'm glad that we're ending on a really positive note because you're absolutely right. Is that
Mm.
this is opening up an opportunity for a lot of people to work and find better balance between very
Hmm.
elusive balance, I should say, between work and home and family. And this event has sort of put a spotlight on and a test to how well some of us really can work more remotely. And so, with better balance and better health and better peace of mind, that's what we're here to help our employees and our teams do better of. So, Becky, anything else that you want to share before we sign off?
Well, I would be remiss to not say thank you. So thank you so much for having me, Roman. This is
You're
really
welcome.
great. I enjoyed our time today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it too, and I hope this has been a great help to our viewers, both live and those that will see it afterwards in replay. And if you have any questions, I've put Becky's email up on the screen. You can also go to People 415 website to learn more. And until the next time we talk, be well and talk to you soon. Thanks, Becky.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.